If you live in China for a while, you'll notice how cheap everything could be. For a long time, most people believe that Chinese make everything cheap is because the labor is cheap. But it's never the full story. Historically, only China was huge and highly unified. Like I mentioned so many times, China always has a huge population. And a huge population leads to a huge market. This huge market allows people to lower the price for more sales. It sounds simple, but it's something unique in China. Only in China this business model can survive, and only this business model can survive. Price war is very common in China. If you don't want to lower the price, well, someone will. In the end, the entire supply chain in China is making cheap products, not just one of the links. People are good at different things. It's hard to explain why this actually happens, but it's a basic fact. That's the reason we have a trading system, which is as old as we can remember. At the beginning, probably because people lived in different regions, so they had different things. Like if you live near the coast, you would have fish, and the people who live inside mountains have precious stones. So you can trade your fish for those beautiful stones. But in modern time, it's just hard to explain why something is only available in certain countries. For example, I work in a small film production company as a video editor. We have several professional cameras, and all of them are Sony. The reason we chose Japanese cameras is that they are incredibly reliable. For years, we've been shooting videos all over this tropical island, but we never needed backup cameras. Sometimes we had to shoot for weeks continuously, but still one camera was all we needed. That's how reliable Japanese cameras are. We also use DJI drones for aerial footage. Interestingly, you must know nowadays Chinese make the best drones. Any simple explanation is not going to work. So I'm going to skip the reason why people are good at different tasks. Let's just take it as a basic fact. In the recent several decades, Chinese have learned a lot from the Western world. This is another form of trading, the trading of knowledge, technologies, and ideas. Personally, the most important things I have learned are critical thinking and skepticism, which I've never heard of in China. These new ideas opened my eyes and fundamentally changed the way I observe this world. Likewise, Chinese people learned everything that didn't exist in China. For example, in 1990s, Chinese people embraced Valentine's Day with great enthusiasm. The reason was that Chinese culture lacked anything romantic, elegant, and classy. It wasn't the case before. In the past, the gentry class had enough cultural elements that were romantic, elegant, and classy, like Chinese calligraphy, painting, poetry, music, etc. But the gentry class was dead for good in China. Chinese culture turned into a barren land. This became more conspicuous after China was quickly urbanized. The older tradition wasn't fit for people's needs anymore. The Western cultural elements flooded in and filled up the empty space. The brides began to wear Western-style wedding gowns in their weddings because they are elegant and classy. Chinese began to celebrate their birthdays in the Western style. Birthday cake, candles, making a wish before blowing the candles, singing the birthday song, the whole shebang. Because it's fun, which is also something you don't see in Chinese traditional birthday celebration. But the key reason that the American culture is attractive to Chinese people is that the American culture empowers people. That is something completely lacked in China, or probably not just China. For decades, the American culture have been empowering not just Americans, but the whole world by movies, TV shows, music, video games, and books. We watch the protagonists fight against the whole system all along for justice. It became a classic Hollywood thing because it delivers a powerful message. As average people, we all feel powerless and helpless from time to time. We all need something to inspire us and to encourage us. We've been doing that for thousands of years. But the uniqueness of what American culture offers us is that it's in different forms and styles. No matter who you are, there's always something that would work for you. I was very cynical when I was young. Heavy metal music suited me perfectly. When I got a little tired of it, I switched to alternative rock. The American culture provides so many choices that you would never run out of options, and pretty much everything has the power to inspire you. Even TV shows like The Simpsons is amazingly and surprisingly inspiring. Every character in The Simpsons is lousy, but we love them. We even love Mr. Burns. And by loving them, we learn to love ourselves. As average people, who hasn't felt awful about themselves? But The Simpsons demonstrates a different view. Yes, we are lousy, but we are still lovable. The American culture has reshaped the whole world by empowering average people. This is the greatest contribution Americans made for the civilization. Since this video series is about China, so let's talk about what China would contribute to the civilization uniquely in the future. Personally, I deeply believe that the greatest challenge we have to face in the 21st century is the environmental changes. Our future depends on how well we understand our ecosystem and our own powers. While many people are worried about another Great War coming, I don't think it's what we should focus on. The public schools have already changed us. Most people are capable of making more rational decisions. The possibility of another Great War is significantly reduced. Our world is changing to the better. Don't be fooled about what you see on the news. We have more troubles nowadays only because the education made us hypersensitive to the problems in our world. More on this in the later chapters. Unfortunately, the education couldn't make us hypersensitive to the environmental changes. They are way more subtle and unnoticeable, but they are there. Our ecosystem is constantly changing. Sometimes the changes are favorable to us, sometimes the changes are dangerous to us. Worst of all, nature is bigger than us. The changes are always monumental. When we finally notice that some changes are parallel to us, it will always be too late to react. Like how termites slowly destroy your house. If you haven't paid any attention, one day your house will collapse on you. I'm not another fearmonger who is trying to scare you with something completely intangible. Nobody knows what will happen in the future. Maybe if we are lucky, we won't have any trouble for the next few thousand years. But what if we are not that lucky? That's the concern. Facing the future, ignorance is the worst attitude. You can choose to be a lazy bum, wishing nothing will happen, or you can do something and prepare yourself for the possible dangers. A deeper and more profound understanding of our ecosystem is urgently needed. To accomplish that, a global collaboration is indispensable. And if we must do something to counter the environmental changes, we need much more advanced technologies and the power of moving the earth. Chinese are trouble avoiders. They hate conflicts and confrontations. While Americans turn their courtroom into a battlefield, Chinese try to reduce the crime rate, so people don't have to go to the courtroom. While Americans encourage the competition almost to the extreme, Chinese encourage collaboration. While Americans treated China as an enemy for decades, Chinese tried to be friends with Americans for decades. While Americans have been making rivals all over the world, Chinese have been seeking business partners. I mean, unless you are completely blind, you will see the obvious and consistent fact that Chinese are seeking peace and calling for collaboration. The global collaboration is not just for the studies. Technology advancement also requires it in the future. As I mentioned in my book, The Key Information, pushing the technologies forward is like pushing a car faster and faster. The faster the car goes, the more energy is needed to accelerate. Pushing from 0 km per hour to 100 km per hour is easy, but from 100 to 200 is way harder. In the end, we will reach the limit. Maybe 400, maybe 500, but we will reach the limit. We can't push it fast anymore. That's the reason China, only focuses on new technologies today, like AI, drones, battery, robots, or renewable energy. These new technologies are easier to push, but eventually the limit will be reached, maybe in 10 years, maybe in 20 years. Then what? Where can we get more energy to push all the technologies? For example, China now has the best hypersonic wind tunnels. GF-22 wind tunnel in Beijing theoretically can reach Mach 30. To run this thing, 15 gigawatts of electricity is needed, which is about 3/4 the capacity of Three Gorges Dam. The question isn't how many countries could build this kind of a wind tunnel, but how many countries could afford to run it. This is where we are now on the technology advancement. We are reaching the limits. The only solution to break the limits is global collaboration. Otherwise, no more technology advancement for us in the future. Now, the power of moving the earth. What do I mean by that? Dealing with all the environmental problems is dealing with nature, and nature is huge. That means lots of mega projects, and that's Chinese people's strong suit. It's not exaggerating to say that only Chinese people can do this. Chinese people started their civilization with a mega project. Even though it's just a legend, but it must be based on some facts. Roughly 4,000 years ago, there was a sage king called Da Yu, who successfully solved the flood problem of the Yellow River. The Yellow River carries a huge amount of sediment. The riverbed keeps rising. When the water is high enough, it will breach the bank and cause a flood. People living near the river had been suffering from this problem for a very long time. Da Yu's father, another sage king, had already tried to solve the problem by building embankments, but it didn't work. The river still was able to breach the embankment. Da Yu learned lessons from his father's failure and solved the problem by digging a canal. The water would be channeled into the sea when it rose. This could be the first mega project the Chinese did in history because this kind of a job definitely needed lots of people working as a huge team. Mega projects are not something unique about China. Ancient Egyptians also made pyramids. But what's unique about China is that Chinese people have been doing mega projects consistently for thousands of years. The Great Wall is a typical example. You might think that the Great Wall was built by some people at a certain time only. But the truth is that Chinese have been building and amending it for thousands of years. Almost every dynasty had to do it. The oldest Great Wall was pretty much all disappeared. Today, the Great Wall you can see was majorly built during the Ming Dynasty. The Ming Dynasty lasted about 270 years, and the people were building the Great Wall every year. Doing mega projects like the Great Wall was never easy. But since Chinese culture discourages people to be different, and the Chinese people's collective personality allows it, like I mentioned in the previous chapters, most Chinese people don't really care if they are different or not. Organizing a huge amount of people for a mega project was easier to accomplish. Nowadays, only Chinese are doing something substantial to protect our future. The Western world? Nothing but talking. This girl is the typical example. What did she actually do to protect the environment other than talking? But I don't think the Western world didn't want to do anything. More likely, they didn't know how to do it, or even worse, they had no guts to do anything. More or less, the Westerners are indoctrinated by Christianity. More or less, they believe the apocalypse is inevitable. Deeply religious people probably are wishing the apocalypse to come. They're wishing this world to burn. But like I mentioned in the previous chapters, Chinese people have no trouble against the nature, against any deities. They don't depend on them. They are not going to sit there and wait for an end, or pray for help from gods. They are going to do everything themselves. So as long as there are Chinese people on this planet, the apocalypse is not going to happen, because Chinese people don't believe that crap. If you ask what Chinese people do believe, I think they believe their own hands, their determination, and their patience. And these are what we need to protect our future.